there exists a select small list of people, groups, and IPs that one may consider magical. For the Beatles, it wasn't one person, it was the amalgamation of 4 insanely talented artists. For Steve Jobs, it was his unique way to combine the liberal arts with personal computing. Even haters of Steve Jobs, the Beatles, and artists like Michael Jackson can recognize that there's something about them that's a step above everything and everyone else. In a vast sea of talent, there's a couple artists, groups, and IPs that just stand out. The criteria for something to be magical, as I describe, is relatively vague. It's more of a feeling, and the maturer side of me is forcing myself to admit that it is relatively biased. And that's especially the case when it comes to art. After Hours by The Weeknd is a magical album that will withstand the test of time. Just like Dark Side of the Moon, Abbey Road, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and even Thriller. After Hours is the 4th studio album released by Abel Tesfay, more commonly known as The Weeknd, and it was released on March 20th, 2020, which, trust me, we are going to get to because the date of its release has a very important impact on the album overall. Before we take a deep dive into what makes After Hours by The Weeknd so magical, make sure you hit the like button so we could share this with more people. So After Hours was primarily produced by The Weeknd, but there were some features on it, and those include Dahlia, Alangelo, Max Martin, Metro Boomin, and OPN, most of whom The Weeknd had worked with previously on various other projects. It debuted on top of the Billboard 200, which marked the 4th consecutive Weeknd album to make that list. And not only that, but it stayed at the top of that chart for 4 weeks. It also reached the top spot in 20, yes I said that right, 20 other countries. That just goes to show how successful of an album that is, but honestly that's beside the point. You already know how strong of an album it is. Between the various TikTok trends about blinding lights or the Super Bowl performance where he's running through the mirrors, so much has came out of this album that isn't just the music, it's the lifestyle. But let's go back to what made it something magical, and that's when it was released. Like I mentioned earlier, After Hours was released on March 20th, 2020, which some of you may know was a very historic period in time. Right at the time the world was going into chaos over fear of a worldwide pandemic, After Hours just dropped. That time in history was scary. It was dark, cold, and most of us felt alone. And for the Weeknd fans like me, because I've been a big Weeknd fan forever, I was waiting for After Hours to drop, and when it did, it immediately reflected what was going on in the real world. And let me tell you, it was the perfect storm. Obviously, no one could have predicted the pandemic to happen, but After Hours almost magically knew the right time in history to drop. The tone of this album is so fitting with the mood of the world at the time. After Hours set the tone for a dark, scary, and most of all, lonely world, which is exactly the condition that we found ourselves in right at this time. I'll actually never forget this. The first time I heard After Hours, I was picking up my girlfriend from her office in Philadelphia. And the crazy thing was, this was a Friday, so I was picking her up on the day her office closed down because of COVID. I have a very, very vivid memory of her bringing out a ton of belongings because she had no idea when she was going to see The Office again. Maybe that's part of the reason that I have such a strong bias to the album, but I do think there is something to be said about the way the tone strikes so well with the date that it was released. All in all, After Hours is an album all about self-reflection and how lonely it could be when you realize who you truly are. So whenever I click play on Alone Again and the first couple notes start ringing, it automatically brings me back to this cold, scary world that we were in. And for some people, that may have been a big negative in their life, but for me, I saw the pandemic as a big time for opportunity. Yes, it was scary, but at the same time, it was a great opportunity for me to find out who I was, and not to mention, it was also a great time for opportunity. So as much as I hated being in quarantine, as much as I hated the pandemic overall, I did think there was great opportunity, so I kind of look at those memories made in that time with rose-tinted glasses. And maybe that's why I think The Weeknd's After Hours is so magical to me. But the thing is, I know it's not just that, and I know it's not just me because of its mass success. And while some may not see it as something magical, there is something to say about the power that this album had. Because this album is a celebration celebration of all things art. After Hours is a celebration of Hollywood, theater, pop culture, and even the music industry. It's a big performance on all fronts, whether it's just the album itself or the character that Abel put on for the whole duration of the marketing. Ultimately, it's a celebration of art culture. And like I just said, the story of After Hours isn't just told in the album, it's told in music videos, live performances, even at the Super Bowl. It really felt like a movie. It didn't just feel like an album because of the character that Abel was playing. But obviously, like all art, yes, you could play a character, but it's written from a genuine place. A lot of the album is The Weeknd's retrospective on his breakup with Bella Hadid. It touches on mistakes he made, things he's guilty for, and the life that could have been if he stayed with her. And these are all things all of us have experienced at one point or another. So the opener, Alone Again, kind of has a double meaning. Not knowing how to be alone is one of the most scary and somewhat bipolar feelings. Because like I said, on one hand, it is terrifying to go back to being on your own after being with someone for so long. Yet on the other hand, it's so exciting and you're mixed in your emotions because one minute you're very happy, next minute you're very sad, and then somewhere in the middle you're very confused. And then on the other hand, for the listeners who make up their own interpretations, this dropped at a time where we were all alone again. I remember the beginning of the pandemic was a scary time. For the first couple weeks of the pandemic, it was a time where even though we were all alone, we all felt so united. And honestly, I wish we could have always stayed that way because that would have been a great sense of unity. But unfortunately, it did take a turn for the worst and things have gotten not so great since then. But the one thing holds true in that it was a time for all of us to be retrospective. And nothing in art culture at the time touched upon this more than After Hours. And for that reason, and many more, After Hours is truly something magical. Hey everyone, Jerry here. Hope you liked this video. This is part of a running series that I'm working on called Something Magical. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it's all about people, groups, and IPs that are something magical. So if you like the sound of that, make sure you check out the channel. I do have a playlist for my Something Magical videos, and they are growing. There is going to be more soon. At the moment of filming this, there's only 2 up there, but I promise it's growing. Anyways, if you like this video, make sure you hit the like button so we could share this with more people, and you may want to check out the channel for everything I post. Maybe you don't, doesn't matter to me. Either way, thank you so much for coming to this video, and until the next one, peace out.